Good morning, everybody. My name is Xavier. I am an attorney and parishioner at St. Alphonsus Rock Church, one of the sponsoring parishes of this event. This event is sponsored by St. Alphonsus Ligouri Rock Church and St. Francis Xavier College Church as part of a Lenten journey discovering and talking about our criminal justice system and what we as parishioners and lay people can do about our criminal justice system. Here with us today is Johnny Waller, and joining us, he may be joining us later. We may have another guest. But before we start, we wanted to call upon Ms. Larson, Katie Larson, to pray for us and welcome us into this space. Ms. Larson.
Thank you. It's really good to be here this morning, and I apologize that I can't stay the whole time simply because I have another Zoom call this morning, but I'm grateful to just be able to do the opening prayer at least. This is a prayer that I've actually heard a couple of times this week, and it just really is sticking with me. So I'm going to share it with you again this morning. Let us pray. In everything we do, O Lord, give us a desire to seek out truth. Give us a willingness to heed the advice of others. Give us wisdom in reaching decisions. Give us faith to believe in our conclusions. Give us courage to put our ideas to the test. And if we prove ourselves wrong, give us the grace to admit it. Amen.
So today's guest that we have today is going to be Johnny Waller. Mr. Waller works and organizes around the state around issues facing and approaching criminal justice. Currently with us, he's here representing Metropolitans Congregations United. As many of you know, that's an organization in the St. Louis area that has a lot to do with a lot of different initiatives that deal with people who are working within and outside of the system to deal with systemic challenges with oppressed people. Mr. Waller, can you give us a little bit more about who you are, what you do with MCU? How does it work?
Yeah, I'm Johnny Waller. I'm a community organizer for the entire state of Missouri and in the entire state of Kansas. And more importantly, my job is to work with people who've been touched by the criminal justice system, such as myself, and that's anyone who's been incarcerated as a felony. And MCU, more importantly, I work with the Expo group, and that's ex-incarcerated people organizing STL, and it is a task force of the Break the Prison Pipeline, also from MCU. And of course, MCU is part of a larger network called the Melia, which has 44 affiliates in 17 different states, and it's a space led organization who gets churches as members and then organize around issues that affect the community. And so currently we're doing, again, the Break the Prison Pipeline. As many people have heard, that they start estimating the prison population based on like third grade attendance. And so we've developed this pipeline throughout the country that, you know, especially for people of color, like 1 in 3 Black men will be incarcerated by the time that they're an adult. It starts really early, like around third grade, when the criminal justice system starts preparing for that. We also have Unlock the Vote, which is people who have felony convictions are able to vote. And it varies upon states. In some states you can vote, you never lose your right to vote. And in Missouri, you get your right to vote back after your sentence is done, after probation or parole. And then we're doing expungements, which especially the House bills, the SB 61 bill by Senator Williams. So that's something we're working on, and also changing the narrative. We're humanizing people who have felony convictions, because oftentimes we're not seen as really people, and so we're not treated as such. And So we're trying to shift the narrative as well. So that's kind of some of the things that we're working on.
That's a lot, and I'd like to unpack some of that. Senate Bill 61 will be represented next week by Senator Brian Williams will be here along with State Representative Shamed Dogan to talk about legislative efforts in criminal justice system. So you're welcome to talk about that and your work with that, but they'll be here in earnest to talk specifically about those things and other legislative efforts and what's going on with those as we work through. But let's unpack some of the things that you talked about. One of the things that's of importance to this group, because we're a Catholic group of people, maybe not everybody's Catholic, but this is what this opportunity involves, a Lenten journey. I wanted to talk a little bit about how you work to humanize people, and specifically if there's anything that we could be doing as people of faith to assist in that. How does that work? Dehumanization, humanization. I mean, they're not like walking around like robots, so we see them. But how is it that we dehumanize them, and what is it that we can do ongoing, if you will, as a people of faith to work with that? What's going on there?
Yeah, so the first prison was built in 1862 in like Virginia. So we've went through this system that's been unjust for a very long time. A lot of the criminal justice system is rooted in what was Jim Crow back during the civil rights struggle era, and it's continued and perpetuated to this day. The thing with the criminal justice system is it's designed for perpetual punishment, which means anybody who goes into the criminal justice system and comes out, they're in fact civilly dead, right? So when you think about it in terms of people and dehumanizing, anyone who's ever received a criminal conviction, a felony conviction, essentially civilly dead.
Tell me what that means. What that means, civilly dead?
Civilly dead means your civil rights, your civil liberties that are guaranteed by the Constitution are stripped away from you. So the right to vote, the right to hold certain barber license. So I have friends who went and got a barber's license in prison as part of the program to get out to provide services, just to come out and realize that they can't legally get a license. Or in the state of, oh, go ahead.
So you can't be a barber or beautician because you have a conviction?
Correct.
In the state of Missouri?
Correct. Nor can you work at a place that sells lottery tickets.
I've known about that provision for lottery tickets. That just was out when that first came out. I think that's like nationwide too.
Well, that's a state law.
It's not a state law, but I think it's nationwide, that all the states that have the lottery have that law, that particular thing.
Yeah, I don't. That it doesn't really make sense to me. And so that's part of being civilly dead. You can't be a juror. You can't own a firearm. You can't run for public office. Even if it's been 15 years, you still can't. So all the civil liberties that people enjoy, and at some point we really kind of take for granted, like who wants it? I don't want to do jury duty, but that's part of your civil liberties or your civil rights that were guaranteed to you by the Constitution. All of those things are stripped away from you when you receive a felony conviction, and it follows from when the criminal justice system was created. That's what it follows. Back in the day, it used to be called civilly dead. Like that person's civilly dead. They don't really exist in the country, nor do they have any input. Like you can't school elections, local elections, whatever, how your tax dollars are spent. And it's strange that we fought a war, the Revolutionary War, over representation, no taxation without representation. But people are getting out every day, made to get a job, because 1/3 of all people in Missouri go back to prison on a technical violation, which is like at some point violated parole or something. You're threatened to get a job, so you get a job, you start paying taxes. But what you realize is you have no vote. You have no say where your tax dollars go. You have no anything. And so
So
we have
when,
to.
so when that happens, how is a person who has been formerly incarcerated supposed to work in the system to better themselves? It sounds like what you're saying is that once you receive this felony conviction, you're basically out of contention for helping to reform or revise the system based on your experience then.
That is correct. Yeah, it's honestly, it's this perpetual cycle that's really created for you to go back to prison. Me personally, I applied for 175 jobs, didn't get one. I tried to go to college to educate myself. I couldn't. They were like, you have a drug conviction. I tried to move into my own place. They were like, no. Like, so all the things that people can do without a conviction, simply I could not do. And it's not that I didn't try or I didn't want to, it's because people didn't allow me to, right? It wasn't my choice anymore. It was everyone else's choice. And the jobs that I ended up getting were simply because someone felt bad or sorry for me. And they hid my conviction. Like they didn't tell whoever their boss was or the HR person. Like they just felt bad and gave me a job. The same way I got an apartment, somebody felt sorry for me and allowed me to live in their apartment. But that doesn't happen all the time. And to me, it becomes, when you read the Bible, there's a story, and really when Jesus is on the cross and he's up there with the two thieves, and one of them, of course, he's talking nonsense, but the other one is like, yeah, I know what I did wrong, but why is Jesus here, right? Well, what did Jesus do? And he ends up going to, Jesus tells him like, hey, you're going to paradise with me. And it's really about redemption. And so when I talk to people, that's what it becomes, redemption. Absolutely. We all make mistakes. Some mistakes worse than others. But we shouldn't have to relive the worst day of our life or the worst choice of our life over and over and over and over. I had one of my friends who I had trained. He went to go work at JCPenney, and he wouldn't apply, and they wouldn't hire him because he had a grand theft auto charge from 1975. I wasn't even born. And they're still holding this against him. So where's the redemption? Where's the, when you look at the legacy of what Jesus left, that's not what this was about, right? It wasn't about perpetual punishment. Like that's not what he was on. So I ask everybody to find it in their heart for forgiveness, for grace, for empathy, for things that the Bible actually that teaches us. And so those things are really, really important because we have to resurrect these civilly dead people because it's unfair, it's unjust. And how would you expect people to reintegrate back into society successfully if you never let them in back into society? If they're always on the fringes, if they're always this permanent underclass of people that can never fully integrate back into society, what are we really doing?
And that's a lot to unpack. Let's go into that just a little bit. Now, you've given me quite a bit, and I appreciate that. We're going to go into it because sometimes the audience, when we've talked before, doesn't fully understand it, and it is better to come from you, which is why we're having this series. And so I'd like for you to sort of let them sort of understand what's going on. So in your ability to get a job, live somewhere, educate yourself, or do anything is inhibited currently by the current state of affairs of our laws and rules about reintegration. Is that what you're saying now?
Yeah. So
you
it's not
can't
just
be
the
just
laws.
a man and stand on your feet, get out go get a job,
No,
and
that's not happening.
that's so that
That's
doesn't,
not
that
happening.
world does not exist. So
That does not exist.
you
And
go in there and you get your barber's license, or you go in there and you get your GED, or you finish up and you get these licenses, or you've made the mistake, you've done it, and so you're saying that you can't just go out and get housing. As soon as you get out, you get a house, you get a job, and that's not true. Tell us about that. What does that entail, or what's going on there?
Yeah, and so it's not just federal, state laws. It's laws from organizations too. And I think a lot of times people forget that organizations have their own policies and their own procedures, right? And we forget that they also contribute. And so and just for people to know this, most of this is post conviction. This is after you're released. There's estimated to be 41,000 collateral consequences to a felony conviction. And yet 41,000. There's so many collateral consequences. There's a thing called the National Institute for Collateral Consequences for a Conviction. You can go to their website, put in any state you want to. It'll tell you some of the collateral consequences that people deal with. Secondly, there's a study, despite how you may feel about former President Donald Trump, he authorized the Civil Rights Department to do a study of collateral consequences in the United States. This report wasn't really talked about, it wasn't widely released, but it says that 60 to 70% of the collateral consequences have nothing to do with the charge that the person has, and it actually does negative public good, and it actually does harm to the public. This is the Trump administration's own report that says that. And so based off that, I'll tell you, yes, when you go out and you try to apply for a job and you have to check that box, have you ever been convicted of a felony? Most times you're automatically disqualified. Now, some of them are because the law says you can't have a job that's reasonably be related to your crime. So yeah, if you embezzle some money, you try to go work at the bank, that's not going to happen. But to blanketly disqualify everyone because they have a felony conviction is really what happens here in the state of Missouri. It doesn't matter what your felony, what they simply discriminate against you because you have a felony conviction. In the current housing law, and I ask you if you really want to do something, come read the housing law. There's a bunch of protected classes in there, but there's a provision towards the end about people who have a felony conviction that allows the landlord or whoever owns that to go ahead and discriminate against that person because they have a felony conviction, right? So these things are written within the law, and then you've got to deal with the policies and procedures of that company who have the right to say, well, we just blanketly won't hire any felons. Or like my apartment complex, we don't rent to people like you. That's what we don't rent to people like you. We don't rent to convicted felons at all. Like we don't. And so those are the things. So I did get a GED in prison. I didn't go to high school. So I went and got I got my GED while I was in prison. Decided to go to college, and it turned into a huge, first they were like, oh, you can't get financial aid because you have a felony drug conviction. Then I'm like, that's not really true anymore. Like the federal law changed. Then it was, oh, you didn't sign up for the selective service. And I'm like, I was in prison. There's no selective service in prison. Like there's no one coming saying, hey, you need to sign up for the draft. Like I was in prison. Then they're like, prove you were in prison. And I'm like, huh? I mean, you can that's public information. You can Google, put my inmate 51451, put that in there. My picture go pop up and everything else. And then when they finally were like, oh, okay, Then they had to go in a back room and decide if they wanted a person like me to even come to their school. And so it took me years just to get an education, just to go to school to get the education, not to get the education. It took more time to try to get into college than it took me to complete college. And now I have 3 degrees now, but yeah, it was a journey just to get those degrees. I used to own a business. I went to go, they built some nice condos downtown. I went to go get one. They absolutely wouldn't let me in. And so even the first job I got was at a gas station. Like, the lady was nice enough to, because you had to have a liquor license. She was not nice enough to hide the liquor license, and hide my felony conviction and give me the liquor license. And I always appreciated her for that. I don't even remember her name now, but that gave me my first job. So it's saying that you can successfully reiterate and go into society is a lie. And it's something that we keep telling ourselves, we keep telling each other. Politicians tell it to us because they'll say, oh, this is for public safety, or we're tough on crime, or whatever. But you have to remember, when someone gets out and they try their best to get back into society, to get a job, and they're told, no, all these doors, what are they willing to do to feed themselves? What are they willing to do to feed their kids? What would you do if you were in that situation? And a lot of people resort back to crime. So the thing, saying that this is a public safety issue, we're actually putting the public at risk by not allowing people to get jobs. I had a conversation with the local Chamber of Commerce, and they're just now understanding, like, well, maybe we should hire some of these people. And I'm like, you think? You think it's about time? Because, what are they supposed to do if they can't work? I was told that I should be a dishwasher. That's what my parole officer told me. I could be a dishwasher. That was the best that I was gonna do, is be a dishwasher. And so really, the criminal justice system is there's no justice. They need to take the word out. There's no justice in any of this, because all it's really doing, all it really is a system designed to send you back. Once you're in prison, it's just simply designed to send you back. There's no, they keep using the term rehabilitation. There's none of that. It's just simply a way to keep you back in prison. And here in Missouri, we have an $800 million Department of Corrections budget. And so when we start thinking about, do people really want to change the criminal justice system here in Missouri? Would people advocate to lose their jobs? That part of that $800 million machine that they got going on? It really begs for some really hard and tough questions about what actually are we doing, right?
So let me push back a little bit, because we get the pushback, and I'd like to equip my audience to understand how to have that conversation based on what you're saying. And so I normally take the side of the antagonist, sort of, and I say it a lot of times just like people say it when they when they're talking, kind of thing. So what people say, one of the things they would say, Johnny Waller tells a really good story, but at the very end of the day, he committed a crime and he needs to be punished for that. And it's great that the system seems to have worked, because he has a job, he's not a dishwasher, and he was able to make it. People need to just persevere. This shouldn't be easy when you get out and you commit a crime. Any crime, once it's a felony, which is our most serious crime in this nation, People need to punish, and they need to be punished severely for it because it serves as a deterrent. And that there should be more Johnny Wallers in this world who can persevere out of that system and get where they need to go. And those that can't go where they need to go, which is back to prison, because they don't have what it takes to make it in this world. And we have a place for them, and it's called jail. What would you say to that?
There's a lot I would say to that. First, I mean, yeah, by the grace of God, I was able to persevere. And what people don't know when they meet me now, it's like, oh, you're a community organizer, and I own a business as well, and I have 3 degrees, and I've done a bunch of things and won a bunch of awards, and that's fine, right? That's cool. What people don't really understand is, at some point, I wanted to go back to prison. Like I told my mother, send me back to prison. I don't even want to be out here with people because it's a lot harder out here than it is in prison, and I just wanted to go back. And so, yeah, the ability to make it out here is overwhelming. It's not something that like an average person, if you put them in this situation, would be able to make it. That's simply untrue. I made it by, I'm telling you, probably the grace of God. Like it wasn't something that I did more than someone else. And yes, I persevered, and I had intestinal fortitude, as they call it. It's something though that the average person could not do. It's simply overwhelming.
And therefore, we need to keep those people where they are. And if you don't have the internal fortitude and the perseverance to pull through some of this, we do have a place for you. Either you don't violate the law, or when you do, it's going to be difficult, and that should serve as a deterrent for people going in. And people ought to know that it's going to be hard, and that too should serve as a deterrent. And if God selected you, then you would be out and things would be better.
That sounds great in a perfect world, right? And so this isn't a perfect world. And first and foremost, if we follow the law, any law-abiding citizen would understand that the criminal justice system is designed. Yes, I committed a crime. The punishment was handed out by a judge, and I fulfilled that. I did the crime, and I've done the time. Nowhere did I ever sign up for this lifetime of perpetual punishment. Nowhere does it say that in the state law. Nowhere is that in the Constitution. Nowhere is that's just not written anywhere that, hey, once you get out, though, for the next 35 years or until the rest of your life, that you're going to be punished by everybody. And it doesn't matter if they have the legal right to punish you or not. We're just going to punish you for the one thing that you did that one day 25 years ago, or when you were 18 years old. So I can't buy it. And the funny thing is, and I tell this to people who try to use a legal excuse, and I'll say, well, I've taken some law classes. I mean, I've got, again, 3 degrees. I got a master's degree that I got from Rockhurst University here in Kansas. And I'll say, so when we study it, when you're that young, we look at contractual law, we look at your ability to buy alcohol. So when people like me, 17 years old, and I can't go into alcohol, I can't enter into some legal contracts, but I can sign up to ruin the rest of my life? What? That makes no sense at all. Secondly, I have to remind people that as a person of color, black and brown person, I wasn't afforded the right to buy my way, to buy my freedom. And I say that, and I always tell this story. When they finally let me into college, I went to school. My very first semester, I go outside, and there's a group of kids outside. And I'm not talking to anybody. I just got here. I don't know anything. Like I said, I never went to high school. Couldn't remember the last time I went to like a formal institution. So I'm just observing, and I'm listening to these kids. And They're like, yeah, I gotta go see my my probation officer and do all of these things. And I'm like, oh, and they've been in trouble like me. And so I go over there, I'm inquisitive. I say, hey, what's going on? They tell me all these drugs and cases and all these things they've got caught with. And I'm like, how long did you do? They're like, how long where? Like, then because I went to prison my very first offense. I got 2.5 to 5 years and then an additional 18 months for telling you my very first offense. They said, no, my parents took care of that. I'm just gonna do this. And then the judge said they didn't want to ruin the rest of my life, right? And I'm gonna say that again. They told me their parents took care of it. And the judge said he didn't want that person's life ruined. No one ever said that to me. My parents didn't have any money. Couldn't hire these expensive lawyers. We didn't have the means. And no one ever stopped and said, hey, he got arrested at 17 years old. I don't want to ruin his life. We don't get that option. And I didn't realize until years later what my parents took care of. I never knew what that meant until I got older and realized, like, oh, this is what this means. And a lot of successful business people I've met will say, hey, Johnny, I've got 7 DUIs. No, huh? What? Excuse me? Hey, I got 7 DUIs. So you didn't go to prison? No, they told me to go to treatment and this happened and my lawyer did this and this, that. So I was able to get it off my record and now I'm good and now I'm successful. And, I thank God for that. And I'm sitting there thinking like, yeah, we don't get that benefit. So to make these comparisons of, hey, you really have to understand the system, right? And so there's people walking around that who should be felons that's not, simply because they bought their way out of the trouble, right? Because they had the financial means to buy their way out of the trouble. And then again, there's nowhere that says you should be perpetually punished for the rest of your life. And more importantly, you're punishing other people's families as well. Like my kids got drug in to this, and I did this before I even had kids. And so they have to deal with the consequences of something that I did when I was a kid. I've been a felon longer than I've been an actual person in the eyes of the criminal justice system. I did my time. I did. I pled guilty too. Like I didn't go in there and plead not guilty. I didn't take anybody to trial. I didn't quote unquote waste the taxpayers' money. I pled guilty and I went to prison and I did my time. I got out on parole and I did my time. As a matter of fact, my parole officer quit seeing me, returning my phone calls, and I was almost stalking the person. They wouldn't even see me. So I've done everything, my due diligence. So to continue to be punished and civilly dead is simply unfair and it's unjust. And nowhere in the law does it ever even say that. So that would be my argument. That's the argument that I stand on. Like that, no.
You said, you said something about the breaking the prisoner pipeline, and that's something that MCU does. And you iterated that by 3rd grade, they're calculating what the prison population would look like and things of that nature. Can you share more about that with us, please?
Yeah, and so they began to estimate prison populations to build prison. I don't know if anybody remembers this time last year that they were saying that Missouri was going to need, based on the estimates, that Missouri was going to need 2 more prisons, right? And I think it was at the tune of $275 or $300 million or something like that. It was in the paper a lot, and it's simply because they base the estimated, especially for people of color, on these graduation rates, and it starts in like the 3rd grade. And so there's a study that was done, which became it's called the School to Prison pipeline, and it just involves all of these like in-school suspensions, um, the quality of the school district. It involves all these systems that have been historically unjust, that leads you in this pipeline all the way to prison. Right? It's not designed to lead you to Harvard or something like. It's designed to lead you straight to prison. That's why you get disproportionate rates of in-school suspension for children. And we'll see on the news children being handcuffed. And that's already starting this narrative that you're a bad kid and this is what happens. And so that starts you on this journey of going, and before you know it, you're dropping out of high school. And before you know it, you may attend and you may be in a juvenile justice system. And then you're an adult and you go to the adult penitentiary. And so one of the things that they worked on was like raise the age, because they were sending very young kids to prison. And so they had to raise the age. And I don't know if people remember that campaign. It was signed by the last outgoing governor. That was a campaign I worked on as well. But yeah, that's kind of that it starts that early so they can estimate how many people will be in prison. Because remember, they've already estimated that 1/3 of all Black men will be incarcerated at that time. Missouri has the 8th highest incarceration rate in the country and one of the fastest growing women populations in the country as well. So we've really got this pipeline from the time you're a little kid, you get that first out of school suspension, to the time that you go to prison.
So tell us what MCU does and how your work coalesces with that, with stopping that. Tell me what you do about that.
The most important thing is educating people. Like, I don't even know how many people know that this pipeline exists, how many people keep track of, and because I don't know how much of a part it is of the daily life of someone. Like, are they really examining like incarceration rates? Are they examining in-school suspensions, right? So that's really a huge deal, and that's something that's being worked on. Is the rate is very disproportionate for people of color versus white children. They can do the same thing in school, but the Black student is kicked out. Like you're suspended for 3 days. And the other one, they may call the parents and say, hey, this is what happened. How can we work on it? Those are two very different ways of dealing with the same issue. And that starts to set a precedent and a narrative for people of color. And so educating people and then combating those systems of injustice, like, hey, if he puts somebody in the line and that person puts somebody in the line, that the person, they should not be suspended if that other student isn't suspended. If that other student's back in class tomorrow, why is the little Black boy, why is he out of school, right? And those are issues that we need to fight on. Those are issues that we need to champion and campaign and say, hey, no more. We're going to do
that. How do we, is there a way that we can partner with MCU to work on those kinds of things? Do we have volunteer opportunities? Tell us what.
Absolutely. If you are a parent and you are concerned about the break the prison pipeline, and you are concerned about in-school suspension, how people are treated, if you're concerned about any of this, even the curriculum that they use, because if you're watching the news, you're seeing these teachers saying things that we don't want our kids to hear. And so you can join us. Come to our website. You can volunteer. If you're a parent, join the Break the Prison Pipeline.
You have to be a parent?
You don't have to be a parent. No. You could be any. We have opportunities for everybody. Okay. If you want to work with, if you just want to support Break the Prison Pipeline, if you want to support ex-incarcerated people organizing, there are support roles for you as well. You don't have to be directly impacted. You don't have to be a parent. you can simply join those task force. Or if you're a clergy person, you can just join MCU, right? If there's issues and you're passionate about something in your community, if this makes you upset and passionate and you're a clergy member, come join MCU. If you're passionate about criminal justice, if you're passionate about expungement, if you're passionate about voting, join Expo Support. If you're passionate about in-school suspension and the fair treatment of our students and breaking this pipeline that's been designed to send our children to prison, join the Break the Prison Pipeline Task Force. Come to our website. Email me, call me. You can do any, you can call me, email me, text message me.
What's your email address? Tell us what that is.
It's Johnny, JOHNNY at MORE2.org. So Johnny at more2.org. Yeah, there you go, right there.
All righty. Can we donate? It's Lent. We're a Catholic congregation, and part of what we do in sacrifice is we give time, we give talent, we give treasure. Can we donate to this outfit?
Absolutely. We can't win issues with no money, right? I mean, so you can always donate. You can donate a one-time gift to us. You can donate perpetually to us, and your money will be put to good works, because we try to do good works. Because it really comes down to what kind of society that we want to see, and as people of faith, that's what it's really about. Like, if you really believe, then you really believe that there's redemption for people. You really believe in the healing power of grace. You really believe that when Jesus told thief number 2, and that's just what I'll call him, that he's coming to paradise with him, then that's what you believe. And you should want people to have redemption, to have a second chance, and be able to go to paradise, not to be perpetually punished. What purpose does that serve? And where in the teachings did you ever read about perpetual punishment? That we just gonna hurt people all the time, all day, and that doesn't exist. And so we do need money, and we need people to come out to help us fight injustice.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Christine to ask the questions that were in the chat so that we can have that opportunity to make sure that all of the questions, that Johnny has a chance to answer the questions. Christine, were there any questions in the chat that could be brought here and have the answer?
Yeah, there's a few questions. And first off, thanks so much, Johnny, for sharing all of your wisdom with us this morning. I have quite a few questions, so I'll just go through them if that's okay with you.
Oh, absolutely.
The first one that came up is a specific question. While in state prison, do people lose their social security identity also? Do state ID cards and driver's licenses expire while a person is incarcerated?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that becomes a huge issue, because you got to remember, if you do 5 or 10 years, your driver's license is absolutely gone. You've probably lost most of your personal possessions. And so when you get out of incarceration, they give you an example. They give you jobs. I made $1.31 a day. You can do the calculations and the math on that and see how much that comes out to a month. And so when you're released, it's not like you have this savings account that there's a bunch of money's in. They give you this A fee and kind of say, hey, do your best, bye. And so if you've never been in a situation like me, I was young when I went into the penitentiary, and it's like, how do I get my birth? You go through this thing of, hey, I need ID. Hey, you need a social security card, and you need a birth certificate. I'm like, where do I? And then you got to go find birth certificate. Then you got to go find your social security card. More importantly, you got to find the money to pay for all of this stuff, right? Because you've been incarcerated, ain't like you have a car, so you got to find and catch the bus and learn how to do all of these things. And so, yeah, you don't have any. It's not like they prepare you to get out. It's like they should, because 90% of people that go to prison are getting out. You think that they start preparing people for it, especially if you're on probation or parole, because you have to get a job. How can you get a job? So what's the first thing they ask you for? Driver's license, social security card. You don't have it. So all of these things that you have, and if you're on social security, my dad went to prison too. He was on social security. He didn't get it. They told him he was a felon, and then he had to have a hearing when he got out to see if he can get his social. And he broke his back. Like he's really disabled. He broke his back at work when he worked at the power company, and so yeah, you lose all of those things, and it becomes really difficult to get them back.
Thank you. The next question is referencing a statistic you mentioned earlier. Someone said, I think Johnny shared that 1/3 of all people go back to prison in Missouri based on a technicality. Can you explain this a little more?
Yeah, and I'll run some other statistics for people out there who do numbers. The Department of Justice did a special report that included the state of Missouri. And what they found, you can go find this report as well. What they found is 86% of people go back to prison. I'll say that again, 86% over a 9-year period of people return to prison. And I always say this, like if Samsung made phones that blew up 86% of the time, would that be acceptable? If Toyota made cars that blew up 86% of the time, would that be acceptable to people? And I really want that to hit home. And more importantly, yes, in Missouri, about 1/3 of all people return to prison on technical violations, right? Doesn't mean that they actually committed a crime. They may have done something that was against the conditions of parole. And currently, there is a battle in Missouri's probation and parole. They were sued not too long ago, and this was in the paper. They were sued, and I'll tell you why. What's that game called? Sudoku, whatever it is, where instead of them listening to the parole people, they were playing the game and then trying to make the person who was on parole use the word for the day, and they would get points for it. So they're not interested in justice or letting the people, like they're in there playing a game and trying to entice the person that they're seeing to say the word of the day that they've already chosen, right? And so this is what's happening in the probation and parole, and that is a sealed procedure. If the law was changed in Missouri for whatever reason to make that so we don't really know what goes on in probation and parole because it's sealed, but you can go back on a technical violation for pretty much anything, right? You might go to a job. Recently, this happened to somebody. They got a job. Their parole officer was like, "I don't think you should be supervising people." And it's like, wait a minute, like what? How can you determine? That doesn't even make sense. Like, it's a good job. And so if you move forward with that position, you could be violated. Or you could go to somebody's house and they may have something you're unaware of. You could be violated. You could be violated for and this becomes tricky, especially with me, since I organize incarcerated people who have felonies. You can't be around other felons. It doesn't matter why, unless they tell you it's okay. So if I come and talk to you even about joining one of our task force and your probation gets upset about it, it could violate you. Like, oh, he's a felon, you're a felon, you're not supposed to be around felons. And you can say, well, I'm trying to change stuff. I'm trying to be a part of something good. Nah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So people go back on technical violence. It's a real issue in Missouri. It's a real issue across the country, but especially here in Missouri.
Thank you. The next question I have here is, have there been any legal challenges to the legal mandated consequences of a felony conviction on the grounds that they are cruel and unusual punishments?
Yes, yes. There have been, I think to date, maybe 3 Supreme Court cases. Unfortunately, they've all been shot down. We still think about filing litigation because it is to us, and if you really think about it, it is really cruel and unusual punishment. Because once again, once your case is adjudicated and you receive a prison sentence and you do that time, technically you're done, right? You're supposed to be done. That was your punishment. You went to prison, you fulfilled all the obligations, you paid all the fines, you've done everything the statute required you do for that offense you committed. The rest of it, I'm talking about 10 years later, 20 years later, the guy from 1975, it's 2021. A Grand Theft Auto, he was a kid from 19, that's cruel and unusual punishment. And so there's been lawsuits filed on those grounds, but they've all been shot down. Unfortunate. We're still thinking about filing a new case because we really believe it's cruel and unusual punishment.
Another question, how can we change the laws to get rid of these restrictions that you mentioned after a person leaves prison? The ability to vote, change rental laws to allow for renting to folks who have been in prison, allowing for licensing, etc. How can we change those laws?
That was a great question. I'm glad whoever asked that, I appreciate that. First, we'll start on the national level. HR 1, I don't know if anybody's heard about it. We the People Act. So federally, they introduced this and it just passed the House last week. It's a bill, and I implore you when we get off of this to go read it, go look it up, go read it. One of the things it has in it is that people with a felony conviction, once they leave prison, will be able to vote, period. Just period. Like no more, in some states you can vote when you're off probation and parole, because we got to remember some people have like 10 years on probation and parole. This will say, hey, when you're released, you can vote. The thing is, it's only in federal elections. So you'll be able to vote Senate, Congress, your whoever the president is. But we're still proud of that. So that bill passed the House, is currently going to the Senate. That's the We the People Act. It also is combating disenfranchisement of voters, securing mail-in voters, absentee ballots. It's the whole works is in this bill, and that's why it's a huge piece of legislation. So go check that out. Locally here in Missouri, the bill was actually dead. And so we have to resurrect this bill. So we need testimony. We need people to get out, call your representative and let them know, like, hey, I don't write letters, make phone calls, email me. I can tell you, we can come up with a strategic plan so people can vote. There's only 2 states in the United States where people can vote while they're incarcerated, and this isn't one of them. And we need to change these voting laws. The other question, again, it all really comes down to changing legislation. Like if the constituents, which is all of us, make a big deal about some of these things, and we call and we go to Jefferson City and we protest and we do campaigns, and then we demand change. That's how we change it. We demand change. I fought for there was a lifetime ban on food stamps here in Missouri. I fought for 6 years to reverse that ban, and they finally did it. And I was so happy that I woke up one day and someone with a drug conviction couldn't eat, and I went to sleep that night and somebody could eat. Somebody could literally go and eat. And that's what this is really about. So you can always join me in this effort, especially about voting, because again, like that's one of the most fundamental pieces of our country. Like being an American is voting, and so yeah.
And can you remind us, I know we'll talk more about this next week, but what was the bill, the state, Missouri state bill that you were referring to?
Which one? Senate Bill 61?
Senate Bill 61. Okay, gotcha. Just wanted to take note of that for everyone.
Yeah, and Brian, Senator Will, he can explain that a lot more. I mean, so he can explain that one a lot more. We are having an event featuring Senator Williams on March the 19th as well. And we'll be talking about the expungement process, because people get pardons and expungements confused, and they don't know what pardons will do versus what an expungement will do. And so we're going to explain a lot of that and have Senator Williams on as well.
Great. That's just a little teaser for next week. In this presentation, we'll have, as Shira mentioned, Senator Williams here to talk more. Another question, are you saying that the pipeline to prison has been intentionally designed and intentionally maintained by society, or does the system continue because society does not reflect on our systemic racism?
Yeah, great question. And so I'll say this, we perpetuate the system, and no one really deals with systematic, as you would put it, racism. If me and those kids that I went to school with, if they were able to buy their way to freedom, right, purchase their freedom, then how just is our system? If it's I don't want to ruin a young white kid's life, but I don't mind ruining a Black kid's life, how just is our system? If we spend $28,000 incarcerating people, but we don't want to spend $5,000 educating people, how just is our system? When we talk about the war on drugs, right? And I really want you to examine this. The war on drugs versus the war on opium, or this opioid pandemic, as we listen to the words. One is a pandemic, one is just a straight drug war. One is 3 strikes, you're out. One is you should get treatment. One disproportionately affects white people, one disproportionately affects people of color. Like, we have allowed this racism to be so pervasive that it's hard for us to really kind of move forward in the way that we should. And a lot of it is, and as clergy people, I'll tell you this. I went on a Sankofa. If anybody knows what a Sankofa is, I went on a Sankofa. It was hosted by a church, and it goes to the civil rights. I finally went to the Pettis Bridge, and where Martin Luther King Jr. walked across the bridge. I went to the Lynching Museum. I went to the place where Martin Luther King Jr. was shot there in Memphis. And I'll tell you, the pastor of the church, he was my partner. They partnered a white person and a Black person together, so they could start having dialogue and build conversations. And the very first thing he says is, hey, nice to meet you. And then he's like, I had to deal with a church situation. I'm like, well, what happened? He's like, yeah, some of my congregation were wondering why so many Black people were in the church. And I said, well, what did you say? I just told them, don't worry about it. Like, don't worry. I said, that's all you said? He's like, yeah. And I said, so your congregation, where you're a leader in this church, is asking you, because they seeing too many black people in your church, and the best thing that you can say is you just told them don't worry about it. You don't find nothing wrong. And so I grilled the dude the whole way, because, and we do that. We're uncomfortable challenging the status quo in America. We'll see something unjust, we'll see something unfair, and we won't say anything about it. And it's not, and it's really pervasive. It's even I was watching TV the other day and someone said, hey, go get somebody that's good at math, and they went and got a Chinese person. Right? What? I mean, that doesn't, all Black people love watermelon. They love chicken. Like we have these biases and these stereotypes that we perpetuate, and we need to stop. We need to stop. There's racism in America. It's in our school system. It's in our courthouses. It's in our job. There's only 5 Black CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. The only time a Black person wins a Nobel Peace Prize is just for peace. There's no chemistry, no math, no nothing, right? Like, we have got to start challenging the status quo and addressing this, or nothing will ever change.
Thank you. Couple other questions I have noted here. One is, do probation and parole officers in Missouri have wide leeway to interpret a person's conditions of release?
Yeah. Yes. So normally these conditions are issued and you abide by them. But again, like if you take the story of you're on conditional release, you take a job, and then that person determines if you're fit to supervise other people. Now, I'm sure specifically in the order, it does not say, you can get a job, but you can only get a job doing this, doing that, doing this, doing that. It doesn't say that, right? And so these interpretations are made by your officer. Me, for example, I'm trying to one of my conditions was to contact my parole officer at a specific time on a specific date, and they quit responding to me, right? And so whoever they were supposed to answer to obviously didn't have a problem with it either. So they're not following, like it's really up to them. They hold all the cards, you hold no cards. If they make those type of decisions, you either have to appeal or live with them, right? And so they're offered this wide latitude of things that they can do that really affect your future. And there's pretty much nothing that you can do about it. And again, I mean, the guy's playing Sudoku or whatever that is. Like, this is the person who's saying if you can go home or they're playing games with your life. Could you imagine sitting there trying to get free and go home to and this person's playing a game in a newspaper, trying to make you say a word that they picked for the day, like elephant. So you didn't steal any elephants, did you? And the person's looking like, what do you mean, elephants? Oh, okay, score 1 point for me. I got him to say elephant. This is what's happening in probation and parole. Like, it should alarm people. It should alarm you that this is happening. So yes, they get wide latitude to do pretty much whatever it is that they deem fit. And it's really at the cost of people's lives.
This is the final question I have noted. So if anyone else has any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat in the meantime. But someone asked if people leaving prison get any money or anything the day they're released. What about the money or clothes they had when they entered?
Yeah, kind of depends, right? That depends on your family structure or whatever. I got out of prison. I got 5 years. I got out of prison. I had no clothes, no shoes, no money. I wore my prison uniform and my prison boots out of prison. Now, some people's family may hold on to their stuff, right? But in prison, you find ways to get really fit and a lot thinner in most cases, so those clothes don't even fit anymore. So it's not, and some people, you got to remember, like a friend of mine did 27 years. So there's he got out last year, so there's no clothes, he didn't even know how to operate a cell phone. So and there's no money, you have an account there, but unless people are taking care of you from the outside, again, I made $1.31 a day, which comes out with $37. I'm gonna do quick, so $37 a month. And then by the time you purchase like soups and different kind of soaps and all of these other things, like leaves you with about $10 a month. I mean, it's kind of like, you know, and a lot of people end up being on a barter system. And that just means like, I'll give you 1 candy bar today. You give me 3 candy bars when you get your check. And then you kind of get stuck in this, it's kind of like a payday loan. Like you get stuck like paying these loans back, but you starving, you hungry. And so, yeah, no clothes, no nothing, unless your family is very, very supportive and have the extra money because remember, you got to pay for calls. They got to come up there and visit you. That costs money. They got to put money on your books. You need all of these things, like, and it costs money. And lots of people don't have it. So you just kind of I got out with nothing.
Thank you. And there was another question that just came in. Someone asked if you could talk about the bail system and the injustices in that system.
Great question. Glad you brought that up. That is something that we're trying to work on. Yeah, so we are currently putting together a campaign to end cash bail. And so again, we go back to this legal aspect for all those challengers out there. Within the confines of the law, you are innocent until you're proven guilty, right? But a lot of people, while their case is weaving itself through court, I'll give you one example. I talked to the prosecuting attorney in Kansas City, and she said the average case takes 143 days. And I said, so whether they did it or not, whether they've been found, they just gonna sit for 143 days. Well, yeah, I mean, if they can't pay the bond. So we're criminalizing poverty now, right? It's simply because you can't afford, again, we go back to this buying justice. If you can't afford to bond out of jail, you're just gonna sit there. And if you look at it, the odds of you taking a plea, just wanting to get it over, really increase. The likelihood of you, whether you did it or not, and you can look at these examples of exonerees that's happening all across the country, including the Midwest. And it's simply because you couldn't afford justice. And so you imagine a person who has a very small crime, and I'm gonna walk you through this scenario. And they have this fine that they can't pay, and they issue a warrant for their arrest. And say they're on their way to work or going somewhere and they get pulled over. Maybe it's a tail light. Maybe they didn't use a blinker when they switched lane, and they get pulled over. And they're like, you have this warrant for your arrest for minor violations. And that officer can take you to jail for that. So they take you to jail, they tow your car, say, hey, you know, your bond is $5,000 that you need to get out. And you're looking like, you know, I don't have $5,000 to get out of jail. So you're gonna sit in jail, whether you've done it, and if you ever look up the statistics of how many people are actually found guilty or plead guilty versus the people the case was adjudicated, I guess, quote unquote, within their favor, you'll be surprised at how many people just sit there and then just get out and be like, oh my God, I've lost everything. And so you may lose your job. More importantly, if you got a car, your car, first of all, is, what is it, $286 as soon as it gets hooked up, and then like $30 a day. So imagine if you sit for 30 days. Then they go auction your car, you lost your job, you go to court, and the judge says something like, you know, oh, we looked at this case dismissed. What? I have no job, no nothing. Simply because you could not afford to pay whatever this fine was, right? Or you get a bunch of tickets, they suspend your license, you can't pay, you get revoked or something. And again, they taking your car, they taking you to, and it's simply because you can't afford it. And as we look at COVID-19 and the unprecedented situation that this has caused across the country, people are in tight financial positions, right? Some of us, my mother, She made $85,000 a year. She was a general manager of a hotel, and she got fired because no one was going to hotels. And so when you start thinking about these things, why are we criminalizing poverty? And if you're innocent until you're proven guilty, shouldn't we wait for the court system to determine that person's innocent or guilt before we just, there's people who have sat in jail on a case for 3 years just to be released. There's 6 months, 1 year, 18 months just to be released. So we have to stop criminalizing poverty. We have to stop. And there's other states that have already done this. And it's our time to do it now.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions that I have from folks.
Thank you. And thank you, Johnny, for just enlightening us. I appreciate everything you had to say. I think that it gave a number of people, especially the collateral consequences of that. I like the fact that you went into what happens when someone is accused and not convicted, because I have to deal with that, where you get accused, you lost your house, all your clothes, your car. People think you've been kidnapped by aliens because they just don't see you again. Your kids don't know where you are. No one knows where you are until you have the money to call out. And by then, it's if your family can beat someone for kicking your door down and stealing all your things, that may be the only way that you have anything to be released 7 months, 8 months later, and you still have an arrest record, which means that you may still fall. You weren't even convicted of anything, which means you have to get that expunged, which takes money to do, which you can't have, and you won't get a job until you do. So yes, I've seen that, and I'm glad that you were able to explain it in a first person narrative so that people could understand that. We thank you, and we just think that hopefully this has enlightened our group, and now you have some marching orders. You know where you can donate, you know where you can volunteer, you know what you can do. And we just thank everybody for coming, and have a pleasant rest of the day.
Thank you very much.